Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me the one and only in person Gazelam Ali right here. And so we're going to talk about religion and the occult. And so, first of all, I just want to say that along my path, I've learned to, first of all, respect all religions because I believe that there's a spark of the divine in all religions, and I believe we can learn something from all spiritual paths and religions. What do you think, Gazelam?
I pretty much think the opposite. I think religion is the bane of humanity and should probably be eradicated in our information age when mythologies need to be busted. I'm an expositor, so I like to expose
Okay.
mythology. And I think that's a big problem that we're in right now with the rise of Christian nationalism and people putting Bibles in all the schools and stuff. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I like the fact that we disagree on that. I do think that religion doesn't do anything for us to advance as a species. Um, but at the same time, there's hypocrisy in every spiritual path, even in the left-hand path and the right-hand path. In all forms of occultism, you'll see um, the same hypocrisy and the same people being taken, the same type of method of people being taken advantage of in all spiritual paths. And then also, I will say that, you mentioned about the rise of Christianity. There's also, I think that religion is declining. I think that as more with uh, the internet and the digital age, more information is being available to us, and that's part of the reason why religion is declining. What do you think?
Well, and also why people are getting so desperate to hold on to imaginary things, you know. The whole thing with religion is I don't think bad ideas need to be respected, you know. And the thing is all you need is just some basic knowledge on communication skills and just critical thinking. I just keep drilling that in. Like I think critical thinking, especially that's people that like magic and things like that. I see magic as something is almost a cathartic thing or something to help my artistic and creativity or something to even be you know just something to be able to work with. But so many people spend all this time on some kind of magical spell or something when they should just go out and do it.
Mhm. Yeah,
You
well,
know
yeah,
what I
you have
mean?
some armchair occultists, people that will just kind of just read books and not really practice much or at all. And I do believe even with religious people, the Bible says faith without works is dead. Um, but I do believe that yeah, bad ideas should be thrown out, but I think that in time, people will figure things out for themselves as uh, as the generations go by, as religion um, declines. Eventually, people will just figure it out for themselves. However, I think that religion is getting a little desperate, knowing that it's losing its hold on the people, and maybe it's trying to destroy everything before people can figure things out for themselves and eradicate it completely. So I do respect your opinion on that. Um,
Well, the thing is, what does control need? More control.
right, right.
And it's really a way to
Well,
manipulate people and things. That's why magic and religion go hand in hand because most of it's just hocus pocus and ways for people to take advantage of other people, you know what I mean?
well, you said magic and religion go hand in hand, and so that's one of the reasons why I think that it is still necessary to study these things. Is that these spiritual beliefs? Is because, like I said, we can learn from them. If it depends, there's a saying that goes, "It's not in finding new lands; it's in seeing with new eyes." And I think is if we look at these stories and these rituals and these spiritual practices, no matter how absurd they may be, if you look at them from a certain vantage point, we can see certain lights at the end of the tunnel. We can adjust our magical practice, looking at things from their point of view. Maybe not completely, maybe just a little bit, but it's good to see things from other points of view.
Well, I can see mythology as an allegory or stories to be able to say something else and have a deeper meaning to something, you know.
Mm.
So as in an allegory sense, or with mythology of being ways for us to be able to relate through stories.
Mm-hmm.
But when it makes it so people are a lot of times people aren't interested in mythology in a broader sense. They're only into their own bullshit, you know.
Mm.
And I think where people that are into occultism and magic and things like that, a lot of times, especially with chaos magic, is that opens up to where they can take from different places. Like for instance, like the magical Greek papyrus that were mostly written by Jewish people, borrowed from the Egyptians and borrowed from the Greeks and even Christianity and all these different things. So I mean, you can see forms of chaos magic happening clear in the early ADs and stuff like that. And so in that type of sense, we're more open to see how other people's mythologies are. I mean, people in the magic community, I'm atheist, so I don't believe in a god or a higher self or being or anything like that. But at the same time, allegorically, these gods and goddesses that can represent other things, like almost every culture has a different god that represents the wind or thunder, and it was a way for humans to be able to tell stories or explain things in ways that it's harder than just saying a literal thing. Like sometimes fairy tales and stories can have greater meanings and stories buried behind them and almost hidden inside of them and things like that, you know?
Yeah, well, like I said, as far as it's in seeing with new eyes, there are certain things that we can learn. Like take for instance with when we look at Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology and so forth. We don't necessarily believe the same way they did back in the ancient days, but we still have those because it's good to look at it, and everyone will get something different out of it. You can actually advance by looking at things, those stories from metaphorical points of view, and depending on your multidimensional thought, you can come up with new methods of magic, or you can just look at life in a different way and ascend. Now, as far as let's go on the topic of in-depth study of the occult and Christianity. Now, when you take a look at people who study the occult in depth, you have people who get into the magical squares, the tarot, all these different types of ceremonial magic and chaos. It's endless. High magic, low magic. There's a lot to study, and it goes very, very in depth.
But
Same
those
thing.
things became the sciences, you know what I mean? Like you have alchemy that eventually became
Right.
chemistry, and
which
astrology became
which a lot of
astronomy.
them a lot of them evolved from spirituality and different types of religion. Now, when you take a look at modern day organized religion, let's take for instance Christianity. Okay, so you have someone who reads the King James Bible, and then they may read the Catholic Bible. If they're LDS, they have the Book of Mormon, the Doctrines and Covenants, etc. King James Bible, yeah, and they go just as deep and in depth going through all that stuff. Even though someone from, let's say, an occult point of view might look at that as ridiculous, you can still, I think that if someone, even if they're that deep and religious and in study in that, and they still do some magical practices, like let's say when they pray or they think intense thoughts, and they're focused on a single thought. They're thinking in the present tense. They have their own ways of casting spells. I think spells can still be cast that way, whether they want to acknowledge them as that or not. And I think they can still cause change in conformity with their will by doing those practices. Now, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. Just through my own experience and things, I'm starting to see most of that more as kind of a placebo effect, or putting a self-hypnosis type thing where if you put yourself in the right frame of mind to be able for the outcomes to be. But that's why I was talking also, like people talk about doing their own will and achieving things, but they do these big ornate magical spells and put all the energy into that,
Right.
rather than just going out and doing and succeeding from what you're trying to accomplish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you
And I don't know. And backtracking just a little bit, growing up, we only used the King James Bible.
Right.
And Joseph Smith even claimed in the early church would say that the King James Bible is the closest translation that we actually have to the actual real Bible. Now, Joseph Smith ended up trying to make his own translation of the Bible. The Reorganized Church, or the Church of Christ, or whatever, is a sister Mormon. They had his translation, but it wasn't copyrighted in the LDS, so we never used that, even though most Mormons should claim that Joseph Smith's is the purest translation.
Yeah.
But it is heavily plagiarized from the King James Bible. For instance, like Luke, in Luke, it says that Jesus tells you that you have to love him more than anybody. You have to actually hate yourself. You have to hate your family, your brothers and sisters and mother. But now, just recently, the LDS has come out and said that they can use different translations. And so now they're using modern translation.
So you're telling me that the Mormon Church says now they can use the NIV, and these different translations of the Bible,
and it helps their apologetics because you can say, look up Luke 16.
See,
and there's like, it doesn't say hate, it just says that you have to love Jesus more than anybody else. And it's like, no, if you look at the original word in the original language, hate is hate,
Right. It's not you mentioned about the Mormons using only the King James version. I grew up Pentecostal. You grew up Mormon. I grew up Pentecostal Christian. And we grew up using not only the King James, but the NIV and these other different translations, Bible translations. Sometimes they would say different things, but really
they whitewash a lot of that stuff.
They would
and soften it in a lot of
some translations would, but what I would do is I would get a concordance, a Bible concordance, and then I would break it down, and then I would get the reality of what's trying to be said. And even the King James Bible was mistranslated.
Completely. Well, that's why it was so ridiculous.
Because I think that the people who did King James himself had a political agenda, and these people who put it together had a political agenda.
Sure.
I think that had a lot to do with the mistranslations of King James.
And that's what's funny about that in a Mormon sense is that in the Book of Mormon, there's complete passages of Isaiah that are pretty much cut and pasted out of the King James Bible. But those are there are errors in there that are translative errors that show up in the Book of Mormon. And so that's the thing. It's like if the Book of Mormon is supposed to be the most true book and the truest translation, then those mistranslations by King James shouldn't be appearing in the Book of Mormon, especially because the Book of Mormon, the biggest anachronism in the Book of Mormon is Jesus Christ himself. Jesus Christ to Mormons was there at the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. And so Jesus is named before Jesus ever existed. They believe he's been.
Wow. Well, I just learned something new about Mormons. I don't know much about Mormonism because I didn't grow up that way. But just certain things I heard.
Imagine Jesus Christ hanging out with Adam and Eve.
I've never heard of that. That's crazy. That's crazy. But back to as far as religious people, whether they can really do magic spells and whether they want to call them that or not. Take a look at a Catholic priest. you take a look at a Catholic priest, and you can tell that what a Catholic priest does in service stems from ceremonial magic. He's got a long robe, he's vibrating words and names out loud, and then he's walking around the altar a certain amount of times. He has a censer. It's set up just like a ceremonial magician. Now, I think that the majority of uh, uh, organized religion, people who are involved in organized religion, people who go, they might not, do spells, whatever. Maybe a lot of them just go to church just to go to church and whatever. They go through the motions. But then you have those few that are mystics, and they really have some power. You can find a few of them in just about every religion, if you look hard enough. But what do you think about that?
Well, most religions have it's more of a hidden thing. So like in Judaism, they have the Kabbalah, which is more the mystics side of it. There's Sufism in the Muslim world, Gnosticism in Christianity. But the interesting thing about the Protestant Reformation is that was one of their biggest arguments with the Catholic Church, was that they were using these pagan rituals that had crossed over. And so a lot of that was stripped down during, the Protestant Reformation, and when the Anabaptists and those came about, because they wanted to strip out all the pagan and occultic ritualistic things that were still found in Catholicism. Right. And in Mormonism, I was brought up to think that the Catholic Church was the great and abominable church. It was Satan's church and stuff.
You see, growing up Pentecostal Christian, we thought the Mormons were the abomination of religion. So we were taught, all things associated with them are of the devil.
Well, I call the modern LDS Church with the Daltonite Hoaxterites, which is their new president. They're the great and abominable corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you want to follow mouthful.
Ultimately, I think religions, the main religions are all, they're like corporations. They're all about bringing in money. I think religion ultimately is about money.
Besides the Catholics, the Mormons have more money than anybody else.
I believe that.
And they're hiding them in offshore accounts and things,
And I found speaking of that, I found it interesting, when walking around downtown Salt Lake City, you will see pentagrams and inverted pentagrams on some Mormon temples. What's up with that?
That stems mostly back to Mormonism's involvement with Freemasonry. And, the upside down star is usually seen as the morning and evening star, which is Venus.
Right.
As well, because sometimes people get Sirius mixed up with Venus. Well, the morning star, the Venus was one planet. This is what's interesting about Mesoamerican stuff, is that the ancients, like the Greeks, they thought that Venus in the Western and the Eastern hemisphere, depending where it would appear, was a whole different star. That's why they call it the evening and the morning star. But the Mayans knew it was one single planet. They knew it was the same planet. But the ancients thought they were two different planets.
Interesting.
That's what I read anyway. It makes sense when you say they have the morning and the evening.
Yeah, it's just, when being around Mormon temples, it just made me curious as to why they had that. And then you'll see Freemason stuff all over Salt Lake City.
Yeah, they've just taken down the scaffolding on the Salt Lake Temple, and I was really worried that
they did.
Yeah,
that was up there for years.
They blasted out all the Masonic symbols down there. I haven't been.
They did.
No, I thought maybe they had. I haven't been down there with my physical eyes to see, but the Salt Lake Temple has a upside down pentagrams, which they would call the star stones above each window, and then there's a sunstone, a moonstone with all the phases of the moon, and there's a earth stone at the bottom that has the phases of the earth. And so if you look at it, that is the 3 degrees of glory in Mormonism, which is also Blue Lodge Masonry is a 3-degree system. So it's kind of based on that hierarchy of they see the heavens as like lesser light. So the sun is the greater light, and the moon is a lesser light.
Well, let me ask you this: was Joseph Smith he was a Freemason, wasn't
Yeah. In fact, during his time, he was trying to become the head of the Freemasons um, in Nauvoo. In fact, most members in Nauvoo of the Mormon Church, if you were a high-ranking member, were all Freemasons. And then, especially when Brigham Young came out here, um, because the rituals were so secret in Nauvoo, none of that got passed through. And then Brigham Young made everybody get, they called it the restoration, reformation. He made everybody get rebaptized, re-endowed in the temple.
Right.
And then he went full on with the Masonic rituals in the temple, where you have the actual penalties and the handshakes and everything, especially Blue Lodge Freemasonry. The two grips of the Aaronic priesthood are both just straight up Masonic grips.
I believe it. I definitely.
And then they altered them higher up to be their own secret grips. And one of them is the sure sign of the nail, which is right here because Jesus would slide off the cross. And so they put the nail through here so he wouldn't slide off the cross. But that was the actual hand grip where you're supposed to put your finger there and lock the pinkies. And then you can see, are you in my club? Are you in the same club?
That's on one of your tarot cards on your deck. In fact, later on, Gazelam gave me a deck of his tarot, and we'll go through and look at some of those cards.
That's my Triumph tarot, which is our paintings, and then I have another tarot deck that's exclusively more.
Now we've mentioned some of those cards and showed some of them in earlier videos, but we'll go in depth at it at some point. Now, one last thing I wanted to touch on is we're in the internet and the digital age now, and I think the fact that religion is declining, that has a lot to do with it. What do you think?
Yeah,
but statistics.
Yeah, but at the same time, more misinformation it's people don't dive deep enough into critical thinking.
Okay, so you have just like in let's say your average church, you have most of the people who have basic knowledge of stuff. In any spiritual, even in the occult, the majority of people can be manipulated into believing something that's not true. Then you have those few who are just, they have really, I wouldn't say few, but a handful that have those critical thinking skills down. They will not be fooled. They will not be intimidated. They can see the bullshit from a mile away. Okay. And I think that even in the digital age, when you have a lot of misinformation going around, you still have that handful of people that will affect those statistics, that will be able to sort through all the bullshit, even if you have all the sheep, running around, you still have.
There's a thing that's called the God of the Gaps fallacy. And what it is when someone doesn't understand something, they put God in there. Right. So I can't, why is the sky blue? Well, I don't understand the science behind it, so God must have created it that way. It's really similar with UFO and alien stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, look at these amazing pyramids. There's no way humans could have done that. Just because we don't understand how humans did that, then we throw the whole baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, they're aliens,
People will use that God as a cop-out for stuff that they don't understand. They'll use aliens and UFOs as a cop-out for in different things.
Yeah, and it's the same fallacy. It's the God of the Gaps.
I remember when I was a Christian and I would have all these Bible questions. Sometimes I'd go to a pastor or someone high up and they would tell me an answer like, well, it's God's will that we not know that. That's why we can't figure it out. That kind of just turned me off to the spiritual belief. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not good enough for me.
Well, have you heard of the Pascal's wager before? Mm-hmm. So the basis of Pascal's wager is that it's better to believe and not go to hell than to not believe and then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I know where you're getting that.
And if you're wrong, it's better to be wrong and then just be wrong than to be right, to say, oh well, there is a heaven and I better follow all the rules to get into heaven, it's better to believe than to not, you know.
So you're saying, and it brings me back to that Japanese proverb that goes, "It's better to understand a little than to misunderstand a lot." That's what you're getting at, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, the
I
Pascal's wager, it's like, well, what God are you talking about? Are you talking about the Abrahamic God? Are you talking about Osiris?
It's a very broad term. Yeah.
So if you don't follow those other gods, what if those gods are right? Then you're screwed on the other things.
It's
So,
endless. It
yeah.
just it goes on and on.
And so like you're gonna get struck down by Thor because you didn't believe in Thor, you know. See how silly that sounds, but that's a big argument with Christians is that, oh, it's better to believe and be wrong, you know, be wrong than to believe and
Right.
end up going to hell because you didn't follow all the rules or whatever.
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, that's just some little discussion that we had put together for you guys. Another episode of Religion and the Occult. Be looking out for more in-person videos from us. Make sure you check out Gazelam's links. They will be below in the video description. And everyone who's watching, make sure you like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.